My mom walked out 10 years ago. Now she wants a spot at my wedding. Subreddit. R/ true off my chest. User. Thor underscoring drama. I never thought I'd hear from her again. For 10 years, my mother has been a ghost in my life. Someone I knew existed but didn't acknowledge. She was a woman in old photographs. A name people hesitated to mention around me. A presence that once shaped my childhood before vanishing overnight. I was 13 when she left. It wasn't some dramatic, movie-style goodbye. There were no long explanations, no heartfelt letters, no teary-eyed embraces promising she'd come back. One day, she was just gone. I remember waking up late for school that morning. My dad had already left for work, and I was supposed to catch the bus, but I overslept. I ran downstairs expecting to see my mom making breakfast, humming along to the radio like she always did. But the kitchen was empty. The smell of coffee lingered in the air, the pot half full like someone had started their day normally. But there was no sign of her. At first, I thought she had gone out to run errands. Then I noticed the little things. The coat rack by the door was missing her favorite jacket. The space in the closet where she kept her shoes was half empty. The drawer in the bathroom where she kept her makeup and hairbrush was left open. A few stray bobby pins scattered on the counter like an afterthought. I called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. I wasn't worried, not yet. I thought maybe she had gone to visit my grandmother. Maybe she had an appointment and forgot to tell me. But when I got home from school, my dad was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his hands. A note sat in front of him. I can't do this anymore. Don't look for me. That was it. No explanation. No apology, just a single sentence that shattered our entire family. The years without her. For the first few months, I kept expecting her to come back. Every time I heard a car pull into the driveway, my heart would leap. Every time the phone rang, I held my breath. But she never called, never wrote, never even sent a message through someone else. I learned to stop hoping. My dad did his best. But he was heartbroken. They had been together since college. She was his best friend, his partner, the person he had built a life with. And then, without warning, she was gone. He threw himself into work, trying to distract himself. He made sure I had food, clothes, everything I needed, but he was never the same. I wasn't either. People at school whispered about it. Did you hear? His mom left. I heard she ran away with some guy. No! I heard she was on drugs or something. No one actually knew anything, but that didn't stop them from making up stories. For a while, I was angry. I wanted answers. I wanted to scream at her, to demand an explanation, to make her see what she had done to us. But after a few years, I stopped being angry. I just stopped caring. She became a non-person to me. When people asked about my mom, I said she died. It was easier than explaining. The wedding announcement. Fast forward 10 years. I'm 23 now, engaged to the love of my life, Emily. We've been together since college, and she's been my rock through everything. She knows about my mom, knows everything, but she never pushes me to talk about it. When we got engaged, we decided to have a small wedding. Nothing extravagant, just a close group of family and friends. My dad was overjoyed. He cried when I told him, and I could tell he was proud of the man I'd become. Everything was going perfectly, until I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. Hey, it's your mom. I heard you're getting married. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt like the past had reached out and grabbed me by the throat. She was alive. She knew about my wedding. And now, after all these years, she wanted to talk? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat there, phone in hand, mind racing. How did she even get my number? Why now? What the hell did she want? The first call. I didn't tell Emily about the message right away. I wasn't sure what to say. But after a few hours of staring at my phone, I finally caved. I called the number. She picked up on the first ring. Hello. Her voice was the same. Maybe a little older, a little more tired, but still her. I didn't say anything at first. I wasn't even sure what to say. A million questions ran through my head, but all that came out was, "How did you get my number?" There was a pause. "Your aunt gave it to me," she admitted. I've I've been trying to keep up with your life in my own way. I know that doesn't mean anything to you, but I have. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You left. I know. You never called. I know. Another pause. "I'm sorry," she said, and it sounded real. "I know I don't deserve anything from you. I just... I heard you were getting married, and I couldn't stay silent anymore." I clenched my jaw. "What do you want?" A deep breath. "I want to be there," she said. "At your wedding. I want to see my son get married." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was insane. "You walked out 10 years ago," I said, my voice shaking with barely contained anger. "You left me and Dad with nothing but a fucking note. And now, after a decade of silence, you want a spot at my wedding? Are you kidding me?" "I know how it sounds," she said quickly, "and I know I have no right to ask. But please, just let me explain." I exhaled sharply. "You have one chance. Start talking." And so she did. But nothing could have prepared me for what she was about to say. I sat there, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white, listening to the woman who abandoned me try to explain why she thought she deserved a spot at my wedding. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she started, "but I need you to know that leaving wasn't as simple as you think." I scoffed. "You left a note and disappeared for 10 years. Seems pretty simple to me." There was a pause on her end, then a shaky breath. I was in danger. I almost dropped the phone. "What? Your father?" She hesitated. "I don't know how to say this, but your father wasn't who you thought he was." I felt my stomach drop. "What the hell are you talking about?" She took another deep breath. "Your dad wasn't just some nice guy who worked hard and came home every night. There were things happening behind closed doors, things I wasn't strong enough to fight back against." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. "Are you trying to tell me he hurt you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. More silence. Then, "Yes." I stood up so fast my chair nearly fell over. "No, no, that's bullshit." I snapped. "Dad was broken when you left. He barely got out of bed. You destroyed him." "I know it looks that way," she said softly, "but I need you to hear me out. Please." I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the room. "What exactly are you saying?" I demanded. She exhaled. "I'm saying I was trapped in a marriage that wasn't safe for me anymore, and I had no way to take you with me." I clenched my jaw. "You expect me to believe that you left me with an abusive man?" I spat. "And then never once tried to check in? Never called, never wrote? Just left me alone with a monster?" "That's not what I..." "You're lying." I cut her off. "You're making this up because you feel guilty, and now you want to paint yourself as a victim." "I was a victim," she said, her voice shaking. "But I was also a coward, and I hate myself for leaving you. You have no idea how many times I picked up the phone to call you, how many times I wanted to come back. But I thought maybe you were safer with him than you would have been with me." I shook my head. "I don't believe you." "I can prove it." That made me stop. "How?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I still have the police reports." I felt like the room was spinning. "What?" "I filed multiple reports over the years," she admitted. "But back then, it was my word against his. And he had everyone convinced I was just overreacting. Even my own family didn't believe me." I swallowed hard. "Then why leave me?" "Because he never hurt you," she said quickly. "And I thought if I stayed, I'd make things worse. I thought if I left, he'd focus on being a good dad to you instead of fighting me. I could barely breathe. I don't know what to believe right now, I admitted. I don't expect you to trust me overnight, she said. But I can send you everything. The reports, the restraining orders he ignored, even the hospital records. I didn't respond. I just want a chance to tell you the truth, she continued. Not for your wedding. Not because I want a seat at the table, but because you deserve to know what really happened. I hesitated. Then, after what felt like forever, I said, "Send them." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath the entire time. "I will," she promised. I hung up without saying goodbye. 2 minutes later, a notification popped up on my phone. She had sent me the first document, and what I saw changed everything. I sat there, staring at my phone, my heart pounding in my chest. The first document was a police report, dated 12 years ago, 2 years before she left. The words blurred as I read, my brain refusing to accept what was in front of me. Victim, my mom's name, suspect. My dad's name, incident. Domestic dispute, physical assault. The details were horrifying. She had reported bruises. A neighbor had called the cops after hearing screaming. She had told them she was scared for her life. And yet, nothing had come of it. I scrolled down. Another report. And another. 3 different times, she had gone to the police. 3 different times, they had documented injuries, bruises, signs of a struggle. 3 different times, she had tried to get away. And no one had believed her. I felt like I was going to be sick. Because if this was true, if my dad had been abusing her all along, then that meant everything I thought I knew about my childhood was a lie. The confrontation. I didn't wait. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my car keys and drove straight to my dad's house. The whole way there, my mind raced. Maybe there's an explanation. Maybe she faked the reports. Maybe this is just some elaborate manipulation tactic. But deep down, I knew. I knew because I remembered the way she had started to shrink before she left. The way she used to flinch when he raised his voice. The way she never fought back, never yelled, never even argued when he was upset. At the time, I thought she was just weak. Now, I realized she was scared. I pulled into my dad's driveway, barely remembering the drive over. My hands were shaking as I got out of the car. He was sitting on the porch, beer in hand, like he always did in the evenings. When he saw me, he grinned. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "What's up?" I gripped my phone so tightly I thought it might crack. I talked to Mom. His face barely changed. "Oh," she sent me the reports. That made him pause. Just for a second, a flicker of something in his expression. Then, he leaned back in his chair and took another sip of beer. "I see. That's all you have to say?" I demanded. "You see." "What do you want me to say, son?" he asked, voice calm. Too calm. "I want you to tell me the truth," I said. "Did you—" My throat tightened. "Did you hurt her?" He sighed, rubbing his jaw. "It's complicated." "No," I snapped. "It's not." Another long pause. Then, finally, he said, "She was never supposed to tell you." I took a step back, like I'd been slapped. That was it. That was my answer. Because he hadn't denied it. Because he had expected her to stay silent. Because he had assumed I would never know. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. "You let me hate her," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "You let me believe she abandoned me." "She did abandon you," he shot back. "She left you. She could have taken you if she wanted, but she didn't. She couldn't take me," I said, my voice breaking. "You made sure of that." For the first time, something like guilt flickered in his eyes. But I didn't wait for more. I turned around, got in my car, and drove away. And I knew in that moment that I would never look at my father the same way again. The next few weeks were a blur. I didn't talk to my dad. I barely spoke to anyone. I felt like my entire childhood had just been rewritten in front of me, like someone had ripped away the foundation of my life and left me standing in the rubble. Emily tried to be there for me, but I didn't know how to explain what I was feeling. How do you tell someone that the man you idolized, your only parent for the past 10 years, had been a monster behind closed doors? How do you admit that you spent a decade hating the wrong person? The worst part was the guilt. I thought about all the times I had blamed my mother, all the times I told people she was dead just so I wouldn't have to explain why she wasn't in my life. I thought about my dad comforting me on the nights I cried myself to sleep, telling me that she had never loved us, that she had walked away because she didn't care. I had believed him, and now I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror without feeling ashamed. Reaching out, after 2 weeks of silence, I finally texted my mom, "Can we meet?" She responded immediately, "Of course, whenever you're ready." I wasn't sure I was ready, but I met her anyway. We sat across from each other in a quiet coffee shop. She looked older than I remembered, more fragile, but her eyes were the same. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "You don't have to say anything," she said softly. I stared at my hands. "I hated you," I said, "for years. I blamed you for everything." "I know," she whispered. "I called you a coward," I continued. "I told people you were dead. My voice broke. "I'm so sorry." She reached across the table, hesitating before gently taking my hand. "I don't blame you," she said. "You were just a kid. You believed what you were told. That's not your fault." Tears burned in my eyes. "I should have known," I choked out. "I should have seen it." She shook her head. "You were a child, and he was very, very good at hiding the truth." I swallowed hard, trying to keep myself together. Finally, I took a deep breath and said the thing I had been avoiding for weeks. "I want you at my wedding." Her eyes widened. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "You deserve to be there." A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, but I saw the way her hands shook. "I don't want to cause drama," she said. "If this is going to make things harder for you." "I don't care," I interrupted. "You should be there. You deserve to be there." She covered her mouth with her hand, exhaling shakily. Then she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I'd love that." The fallout. When my dad found out, he lost it. He called me furious. "You're seriously inviting her after everything she did?" he demanded. "After everything she did?" I shot back. "You mean after everything you did?" Silence. "You lied to me," I said, "for 10 years. You let me believe she abandoned me when you were the reason she left." "She wasn't supposed to tell you," he muttered. "That's the problem," I snapped. "You knew if I ever found out, I'd never look at you the same way again. And you were right." Another long silence. Then his voice dropped, quieter this time. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said. "I'm finally making the right choice." And then I hung up. I haven't spoken to him since. The wedding day. When the day of the wedding finally arrived, I was nervous. Not about marrying Emily. That was the one thing I was absolutely sure about, but about everything else. Would my dad show up uninvited? Would there be drama? Would my mom even be able to enjoy the day, or would she spend the entire time looking over her shoulder? But when I saw her sitting in the front row, tears in her eyes as she watched me stand at the altar, I knew I had made the right choice. For the first time in my life, I saw her as more than the woman who left. I saw her as someone who had survived. I saw her as someone who had fought. And when I walked down the aisle, it wasn't just toward Emily. It was toward a new future. One where I finally knew the truth. One where I could finally let go of the past. And as I took Emily's hands in mine, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from ignoring the truth, from pretending everything is fine when it isn't, but real peace. The kind that comes from finally seeing things for what they are, from letting go of what no longer serves you, For years, I had carried the weight of my mother's absence like an anchor, letting it shape who I was, letting it define how I saw love and family. But now, standing there, looking into the eyes of the woman I loved, I realized something. I wasn't that abandoned kid anymore. I wasn't broken. I wasn't lost. I was free. After the wedding was beautiful. Emotional, but beautiful. My mom cried through most of it, but they were happy tears. My in-laws welcomed her like she had always been part of the family. Emily's parents, especially, went out of their way to make her feel comfortable. My dad never showed up. I don't know if that was because he respected my boundaries or because he couldn't handle facing me after everything. Either way, I was relieved. I didn't want his presence tainting what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Kyle, my best man, gave a speech that had everyone laughing and crying at the same time. He joked about how I used to be a groomzilla, but ended it by saying he had never seen me happier, and that Emily and I were proof that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. I caught my mom watching me throughout the night, her expression a mix of awe and sorrow, like she was mourning the years we had lost, like she couldn't believe she was really here. At one point, during the reception, she pulled me aside. "I never thought I'd get to see this," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "You happy. You in love. I thought I lost the chance to be part of your life forever." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You didn't," I told her. "You're here now. That's what matters." She nodded, dabbing at her eyes. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. For some reason, those words hit harder than I expected. Maybe because I had spent so long waiting to hear them. Maybe because a part of me had always wanted her approval, even when I thought I hated her. I didn't say anything in response. I just hugged her. And for the first time in 10 years, it didn't feel awkward or forced. It just felt right. Moving forward, after the wedding, things didn't magically become perfect. My mom and I still had a long way to go in rebuilding our relationship. Some days, I still felt the sting of the past, the resentment that came with all the lost time. But I was trying, and so was she. I started seeing a therapist to unpack everything. My dad's manipulation, the way I had let my childhood shape my fears about love and abandonment. Emily was supportive through all of it. She held my hand on the hard days, reminded me that healing isn't linear, that it's okay to be angry and hurt and still want to move forward. As for my dad, I never reached out to him again. He sent a few texts in the weeks after the wedding, mostly bitter, passive-aggressive remarks about how I had chosen sides. But I didn't respond, because this wasn't about sides. It was about truth. It was about breaking the cycle. And for the first time in my life, I was choosing myself. Final thoughts. If you had asked me a year ago whether my mom would be at my wedding, I would have laughed in your face. If you had told me the truth about my dad, I would have called you a liar. But life has a funny way of forcing you to see things you don't want to see. I don't regret inviting her. I don't regret learning the truth. The only thing I regret is how long it took me to see it. But I'm here now, and that's what matters. TLDR, my mom walked out 10 years ago. I thought she abandoned me. Turns out, my dad had been abusive, and she had no choice but to leave. He manipulated me into hating her for a decade. When she reached out before my wedding, I learned the truth. I cut my dad off, invited my mom, and finally let go of the past. It wasn't easy. It still isn't. But for the first time in my life, I'm free.